Hello and welcome to News Central Now. I am Adebola Adedugba. The top stories are this hour. Gunmen attack Islamic boarding school in Yobe State, leaving 3 dead and 1 injured. Gabon hunter leader Nguema marks first anniversary of coup. Central Bank governor flees Libya amid threats from armed groups. And details shortly. Let's start with the new security issue where gunmen suspected to be Boko Haram terrorists have invaded Faudiya Islamic Boarding School in Yobe State, killing 3 students and injuring 1. The Islamic school, which belongs to the proscribed Muslim Brotherhood movement Shiite, is located in Gaidam local government area of the state. Muhammadu Saleh, Hamed Abdurrahman and Abdullahi Adamo were said to have been killed, while Sani Haruna, who was injured, is currently receiving medical treatment. Spokesman of the Nigeria Police Force in the state, Dungus Abdulkarim, who confirmed the incident, revealed that the attackers arrived at the school on motorcycles armed with AK-47 rifles around 4 on Friday, shooting sporadically. Away from security issues, prominent figures and stakeholders converge in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, during News Central's Town Hall series to discuss the recent End Bad Governance protests that happened across the country. Now, speakers at the event spoke on the issues that birthed the protest while emphasizing democratic rights of people to protest. Some of the speakers urged government to engage in genuine dialogue to address the concerns of the people. The issue of suppression of the right of the media also came to the fore.
Decide to call for a dialogue in which we said is the only way for us to sit down and negotiate with them. But very unfortunate, they take it the way they want, and they did the same thing that they always did as a politicians. Instead of reaching out to us to face our major challenges, in which we mention it to them that those things that we came out to set in the protest, in which education is part of it, unemployment is part of it, fuel subsidy is part of it, insecurity is part of it. All those things we mentioned, none has been attained to. All we see is the Minister of Youth calling his friends to negotiate with them.
I said the Nigerian revolution will start in northern Nigeria. That was at least 5 years ago. My reason for saying so is the knowledge that northern Nigeria is the most afflicted part of Nigeria, but it had been kept supine because of religion. The political and economic class have kept the people underfoot, and they are responding violently because even though you are providing leadership to a subset, there are other people who are not captured in that leadership.
It may be a coincidence that the very first person that appeared on the list of those that were brutalized by the police happened to be from New Central, Bernard Akede, who is also a friend of mine, civic space in the country. So what you're seeing really is what I'll call the liberalization and democratization of intimidation and harassment of journalists in this country. What do I mean? In those days, it used to be within the purview of perhaps the police and maybe the DSS. Whenever they have a disagreement with certain people in the media or certain media organizations, to be the ones to carry out actions, repressive actions against them. But nowadays, it has been liberalized. The governors have gotten into the act. So you write anything that is critical of a governor, a civilian governor for that matter. The next thing is that you are picked up and you are locked up somewhere. You write something that is critical of security forces, whether the army, the police, maybe an IG somewhere gives order, and then they pick up a journalist. The same thing at the level of the military. So everybody has gotten into the act of intimidating journalists and the media. And that absolutely is unacceptable, and we have made it very clear to them that we will no longer tolerate that situation where people can no longer express their opinion. It's a fundamental right.
The Town Hall series news centers efforts at providing veritable platform for the government and relevant stakeholders to address burning societal issues. President Bola Tinubu has approved 50% electricity subsidy for public hospitals and educational institutions to ease their financial burden. Minister of State for Health, Dr. Tunji Alausa, announced the subsidy on Thursday while speaking to journalists in Kaduna State after inaugurating several projects at the National Air Care Center, including a 200-capacity auditorium, student hostel, oxygen plant, molecular laboratory, powerhouse, ENT specialist clinic, operating theater, and female children ward. Alausa stated that the subsidy, part of President Tinubu's efforts to support the health and education sectors, will be implemented soon by the Minister of Power. He adds that the initiative is to significantly lower energy costs for public hospitals, universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education, allowing these institutions to allocate more resources towards delivering quality services. And to unpack this, I am joined by Oluwasesan Okunade, who is an economic analyst. Good evening. Glad to have you join me on the news.
Good evening, Adebola, and good evening to all our viewers across the globe. Glad to be here this evening.
All right. What are your thoughts on the 50% federal government grants on subsidy for universities when it comes to electricity?
Thank you very much. A very good initiative by the federal government to ease the burden of students and citizens. But for people like us, we have it with mixed feelings because we understand that in as much we know the impact of energy costs on organization, we feel it shouldn't be only for government parastatals that will enjoy this, that we're currently staying. When you look at the infrastructure of some of these schools and the hospitals we're talking about, you discover that majority of the common man are actually struggling to go to private school, private hospitals, because most of the time you have that clause of people who are civil servants going on strike for one failure on the part of the government or the other. Not too long, you heard about the doctors, planning to go on strike, and by the time you put this, you implement this which the government is saying, which some of us believe that at times we don't have the full blown of it. It's just at the periphery. You have it for 1 or 2 months, and later some of those things come back to stay. And aside that, who monitors the expense on the part of these civil servants to make sure that they adhere and this actually impact on their expenses? These are few gaps we have seen, and we feel that even though it's a good development so that you can alleviate the problem of the masses, but there are no control mechanism to monitor if this, when implemented, will be used as directed by the federal government. And that's why I have concern, because how many people patronizes public hospital as we speak? We understand the fact that because of infrastructure gap, a lot of people are already taking their faith into their hands. How many people go to public school? People who rather wants to go to private because of strike in, strike out, a course of 4 years turning to 6 years. We feel it's something that should be holistic, not just specific to government parastatal like schools and the hospitals.
Yeah, Mr. Okwade, well, let's stay with the issues of universities when it comes to electricity. Now, we have tertiary institutions like University of Lagos owing, over ₦1 billion. We also have University of Ibadan owing about 495 million naira, which they have refuted. Let's talk about the universities now squarely going forward. What can they do to manage costs when it comes to electricity tariffs?
Okay, thank you very much. Being a player in that sector, I think there's something that we are missing. All this university needs to go into what we call submetering into their schools. What do I mean? You are being bulk billed by the discourse, whether a core or Ibadan, whichever that you fall under. But you need to have accurate billing of what your people are using. Even if you are going to subsidize that to them, you should be able to take it. A lot of porters in some of these schools consume free electricity and is being bought by the management of the school, which on its own, people waste it, just like we have it in the secular world. So I feel one of the things that they need to do, if they need to cash on this, is to go into what we call submetering, where it may not be discos, because the discos is not interested. There are organizations who provide these services in such a way that when you have a particular transformer, you can meter out all the people within that transformer and be able to have what they are using, and even have prepayment solution at which they buy token at a particular stipend so that you can recoup some of those things. What this will tell me is that when you pay for something, you manage it. But things we don't pay for, you discover that people just use it freely, feeling that definitely the school will pay for it. So I think one of the aspects that this school needs to take to caution some of these high bills they are getting is to sectionalize their areas, do go into submetering of those areas and subsidize the rate so that people start paying for electricity. Electricity shouldn't be free. With that, at least they can recoup few funds even for them to go. Even for students, we can start cautioning. I've seen a lot of them that does not even stay on the campus, outside there. They pay for electricity bill. Why is it that within the school premises, because there is hostel within, you won't want to pay for electricity bill? You can subsidize it if you are within the hostel, but it's high time that people actually pay for what they actually consume, even if it's a subsidized rate, and the school can be able to generate little revenue for themselves to be able to augment whatever the government is giving to them from the center.
Okay, let's talk about the move of the House of Representatives, and they've said that they will pass a bill to ensure federal universities are removed from the Band A to lessen the huge bill on them. Do you think this move is appropriate?
Well, it's like giving and taking. When you take them out of Band A and they consume that much, the energy loss we are talking about will continue to increase. And one thing you should know is that you might think you are doing them a favor, but you are causing harm to another segment of the economy. So I feel rather than removing them from Band A, if indeed, because Band A are priority customers, they have 24-hour supply, of which we believe they need as educational institution and health institution. But part of the things you need to do is how to curb the wastages that are actually happening in some of those sectors. And the only way you can do that is going the route of submetering and monitoring, accounting for energy being used by every section of that particular organization or institution. And with that, we can do it. I won't subscribe to the aspect of saying that they should be removed from Band A because it's more or less an institution that provides service, and the other power sector, which is DISCO, also provides service, and they need to survive with time. So if they are enjoying electricity, what everybody is yearning for is to have 24-hour supply. And when you have it, you should be able to pay for it based on what the electricity DISCO are telling us, that a service reflective. So all they need to do is to tame the wastages that they have within the system, look for a way to minimize, and I'm sure with that they will be able to reduce their bills that they are currently faced with the DISCOs.
Well, thank you so much for your time on the news. Economic analyst Oluwasesan Okunade. Many thanks indeed.
It's a pleasure to be with you this evening, Adebola, and greeting to all our viewers.
Time for a short break. When we return, we'll tell you how Labour Party presidential candidates in 2023 election, Peter Obi, reacted to threats against Nigerians of Yoruba and Benin descent. Stay with us. Thank you for staying tuned. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, has announced plans to transfer the operations and maintenance of its Warri and Kaduna refineries to private operators. This was disclosed in a statement released on the company's official X handle on Friday. The Warri refinery, located in Delta State, was commissioned in 1978 with a nameplate distillation capacity of 125,000 barrels per day. It also houses a petrochemical plant commissioned in 1988, producing 13,000 million tons per annum of polypropylene and 18,000 MTA of carbon black. The refinery primarily supplies the south and southwest regions of Nigeria. The Kaduna refinery, commissioned in 1980 with an initial capacity of 50,000 barrels per day, was later expanded to 110,000 barrels per day. The refinery supplies petrol products to northern Nigeria, with a second crude train added in 1983 for producing lubricating oils. And to unpack this, I'm joined by business and social policy analyst Kenneth Ikenwa. Good evening, glad to have you join me on the news.
Good evening, Adebola. Nice being on News Central again.
All right, what are your thoughts on the NNPCL's plan to transfer operations and, of course, maintenance of its Warri and Kaduna refineries to private operators?
Well, it's a very interesting one. We're living in interesting times. It's interesting also to see how NNPC has evolved into NNPCL. And one would have expected that by now the business model for NNPC, now NNPCL, should actually have changed. And I think this is an attempt to change that business model. But we have to be very careful because the NNPCL itself exemplifies what I call the theory of the Nigerian problem. And that theory actually, it hands over an alliteration of C's. And what are these C's? The first is that we have a problem of the culture of management. Okay, so whether it's in the private or the public sector, and especially where a PPP is involved, a public-private partnership is involved, that culture of management will still have to be there. We need to fix that, as a country. Secondly, the NNPC over time has been dealing with contradictions. These are strategic contradictions. And that means that NNPC has had over the years to engage itself in a lot of trade-offs and in a lot of compromises. This is between cost and quality and between growth and profitability. So how can we guarantee that looking at growth versus profitability, cost versus quality, that the handing over of these refineries will actually ensure quality, reduce cost, and that it will return profitability for NNPCL, which comes back to the Nigerian people or the Nigerian government. Now, I think that is actually happening with this particular transition is what I call, or what is known as a fallacy of composition. Now, you want to have a global benchmark. And what should be the benchmark? That should be a benchmark like the Saudi Aramco company. Saudi Arabia is the largest producer of crude in the world, contributing about 12% to total global production. Now, is Aramco Saudi or Saudi Aramco, is it handled by private entities? The answer is no. So let's go back to such model and look for how we can become consistent by benchmarking against the way things are done overseas or abroad and see how we can handle NNPCL, turn it into a profit-making company and one that will create value for all stakeholders. Okay, I do not see how within a year or two this turnaround can actually happen, but it will be interesting to see how it evolves and how it actually unfolds.
You've talked about very key, interesting components there in trying to underline or underscore the issues besieging the NNPCL. Beyond profit making now for NNPCL, you talked about the culture of management, which seems to be one factor, affecting their productivity level. Now, how can this be tackled to ensure optimum productivity for the NNPCL going forward?
All right. If I'm going to give an answer to that question, I'm going to definitely irritate the presidency. And I don't want anybody to come and look for me in the peace of my house tonight to start asking me questions, unnecessary questions. What does that mean? It means, first and foremost, we shouldn't have a president that should be functioning as a president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and also as the Minister of Petroleum. This is not how it is done elsewhere in the world. We're operating a democracy, and I'm wondering if Kamala Harris or if Donald Trump next year, if he will become the Minister of the Defense Industry of America, because America is the largest exporter of defense weapons and other associated goods. We must start restructuring the board of the NNPCL. And what does that mean? First and foremost, and most strategically, we must emphasize political intervention into the operations of the NNPCL. We must look at a board that is accountable to the public. And I think another strategic move that NNPCL should make is to go public. Saudi Aramco went public a little under 10 years ago and is giving profit to the dividends to all stakeholders that have invested. So when you become more accountable, when you become more transparent, when you become a company that is accessible by open book management, I think that will be the trajectory, that will be the transition that is needed to reposition NNPCL and to make it globally and locally competitive. As it is, NNPCL has the potential to be the largest corporate entity in Africa. But we are not seeing that yet because we are neither global or local. In other words, we are not global competitive. We also must take a second look at some of the JVs that the NNPC is into. How favorable are these joint ventures? And when we start thinking in this direction, we can begin to resolve the strategic contradictions and then nip the white elephant, the elephant in the room, which I'm not going to mention and talk about. We all know that, and position NNPC for the best of performance and for productivity and for returns on investment for the Nigerian people and for the Nigerian economy.
Well, I was going to ask you that some persons believe that the president, being the Minister of Petroleum Resources, is to oversee the functions and ensure square pegs are in square holes. But then let me ask you, given the outcomes of past privatization, such as the power sector, we have seen, not too much met in terms of expectations. Do you foresee anything positive from this move?
All right. The talk rests at the desk and at the decision-making, final strategic decision-making of the president. And I believe that we have a president that at one point in time in his lifetime did work in one of the big 4 oil companies in the world. And I think he has the experience, and he must have gained a lot of learning curve experiences over the decades to actually know what is wrong with NNPCL, what is wrong with our oil and gas sector, and how best he can fix it. But I also think that he's belabored and saddled with so many responsibilities that one of such responsibilities shouldn't be oversighting the affairs of a company like the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited as it is now. So should the president be looking at that? He could be looking at that from another point of view. But most importantly, we need to have a team in place, and I don't think the present GMD is doing badly. But we need to overhaul the team. We need to revitalize the NNPC. We need to bring in key players from the private sector. And we need to have a dual board, and we need to have more accountability. I think that there is hope for that sector, and I think that there are a lot of hiccups, a lot of bottlenecks that are hindering the possibilities and the probabilities that could be good outcomes from that sector. But we stand to benefit a lot if we can have this transformation, this transition, and this turnaround. But it will take a lot of courage, and most importantly, it will take a turnaround in the culture with which the NPC is run, in the culture with which we also, handle crude in Nigeria, and most importantly, the character of the collective of Nigerians is important in giving that company a strategic position, not just locally, but at the global level.
Well, indeed, we hope the NNPCL gets it right to ensure optimal productivity. But thank you so much for your perspective on the news. Kenneth Ikenwa, social and policy analyst. Many thanks indeed.
Always my pleasure. Nice.
Labour Party presidential candidates in 2023 elections, Peter Obi, has condemned threats made by a Canada-based Nigerian woman, Amaka Sonbeja, against Nigerians of Yoruba and Benin descent. In a video clip that began circulating on X on Tuesday, Sonbeja was heard making anti-Yoruba Benin remarks during a virtual meeting on TikTok, where she threatened to poison individuals from these communities. The incident prompted the chairman of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabirierawa, to reveal the woman's identity, while the House of Representatives called for her immediate arrest. Reacting on Friday, Obi denounced the comments as divisive, stating on his X handle that such behavior has no place in the society. He urged Nigerians to reject tribalism and religious division, advocating for unity and a prosperous nation. In a move to restore order and cleanliness to the streets of Lagos, the Lagos State Environmental Sanitation Corps has arrested 12 miscreants during surveillance operations in several areas of the state. The crackdown followed complaints from concerned citizens about disturbances caused by miscreant and destitute individuals. Lagos State Commissioner for Environment and Water Resources, Tokunbo Wahab, announced the arrests on X on Friday. He states that operatives of the Lagos State Environmental Sanitation Corps, also known as SKY, were deployed to monitor trouble spots including Falomo in Ikoyi, Adeola Odeko and Sanusi Fafunwa in Victoria Island, and Chisco, Ikate, and Mawa along the Lekki-Aja Expressway. The operation led to the arrest of 12 suspects, comprising 10 adults and 2 minors. Wahab notes that the suspect will be arraigned in court of competent jurisdiction. And now let's switch gears to health matters, where Nigeria is on high alert as mpox cases surge globally, raising concerns about potential entry of an aggressive variant into the country. In response, the Federal Ministry of Health has issued a nationwide warning urging states to intensify surveillance and preventive measures to prevent the virus from being imported. Although no cases of these aggressive variant has been reported in Nigeria, states are not taking any chances on how ramping up their surveillance efforts. Public awareness campaigns have also been launched to educate citizens about the risks and prevention strategies. Nigerians are being advised to avoid close contact with anyone showing symptoms, maintain good hygiene, and report any suspicious cases to health authorities. And to unpack this, we're joined by a medical expert, CEO, Dr. Nesochi, LLC, and that's Dr. Nesochi Okeke Igbokwe. Good evening, glad to have you join me on the news.
Thank you for having me.
All right, talk to me about the key symptoms of this aggressive mpox variant that Nigerians should be aware of.
So first we have to understand what mpox is. So mpox is essentially an infectious viral illness that's a member of what we call the orthopox virus family. Now there are 2 types of mpox, what we call clade 1 and clade 2. Clade 1 is what we see that's endemic in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Clade 1 causes more severe symptoms and can cause increased mortality. Clade 1B is the variant at this point in the Democratic Republic of Congo that the international community is concerned about at this point. So clade 1B has been seen to spread in the neighboring countries next to the DRC. And then we have clade 2. Clade 2 is what's causing, or what caused, I should say, the global outbreak back in 2022. This is less severe, more people survive this, and this is what is typically seen, clade 2, in West Africa. With that said, to answer your question in regards to symptoms of mpox, symptoms usually are going to begin within about 1 week of exposure, but it can start anywhere between 1 to 21 days post-exposure. So the symptoms will begin with a flu-like illness. So one can start experiencing symptoms of fever, headache, muscle aches, chills, swollen lymph nodes, and of course, a characteristic rash that can spread throughout the body.
Apologies for butting in there, Dr. Igbokwe. I mean, we do know that when it comes to issues of diseases, I mean, health workers are often at risk. What are the most effective infection control measures for health workers handling cases of mpox?
Yeah, so in regards to precaution for healthcare workers and the public in general, one thing that we need to be aware of is the role of vaccines. So Nigeria did recently receive 10,000 doses of the Jynneos mpox vaccine. Unfortunately, that's only going to cover about 5,000 individuals because it is a 2-dose series, but vaccination is quite important. Another thing is to avoid close contact with those who have active lesions, active infections. So in the context of a healthcare worker, we have to ensure that they have the appropriate PPE and they have the appropriate supplies in order to adequately take care of any patients that are ill with mpox. and also avoiding contact with wild animals in areas where we see high levels of mpox. So those are really major precautions that can be taken. Of course, public health metrics like increased infection control, hand hygiene, if you were to be around anyone that is ill with mpox.
Now, staying on the talks about precautions, I mean, what are the potential risks or benefits of implementing travel restrictions to prevent mpox importation?
So that's certainly a consideration. However, we know that mpox has been endemic. The various types of mpox has been seen in Nigeria in the past. So in regards to travel restrictions, I think we just have to be more so on high alert because it is now a public health emergency of international concern, meaning that that's the highest level of global alert. So it's really just a call to action to ensure that we are doing what needs to be done to contain the spread of this virus.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughts on the news. A medical expert CEO, Dr. Nesochi LLC, and that's Dr. Nesochi Okeke Igbokwe. Many thanks indeed.
Thank you for having me.
As the world marks International Day of the Disappeared, families in Borno State, Nigeria are making a renewed call for action as they continue to search for missing relatives amid dire economic conditions. Now, while many such persons have been rescued, over 23,000 persons in Nigeria are said to have disappeared, as reported by the International Committee of the Red Cross. News Center's Umaru Kirawa tells us more.
The pain of losing a loved one remains a scar that many families battle with, particularly in conflict-affected communities. A mother to 15, Yagana Umara, survived the pain of the disappearance of 3 of her children in Bama local government of Borno State.
Banzai bazina kosa bibi sandia suta awa duri arbanan kadro da kosa risha suta na adinyan tudinyan so da kirman da sartu sutuna da isu bano ku bazina ku alama ku kintaunzu lare de.
Aisha Muhammad also carries the pain of her elder brother who has been missing for 10 years.
Sarsi isiga tulu nera mukos kana andia banazina sabana mradinyen shimalon da chesina andia suraka myros kana agulte no nyenyi stede kam gade isa saye.
Both Aisha and Yagana are among other family members of the disappeared who converged here to call for more efforts to find their loved ones.
Nala an sobtu iguluya na gwamnati izini fondo ma munjumba armaro registering dia da na gwamnati la izini fonde ranyen da ne lenye Burundi hafke ne an dia raksa kranzane.
In Nigeria, as ICRC, we have recorded more than 23,000 people. But this is just a drop in the ocean. These are people who came to us to register for tracing. We understand there will be a lot more missing persons. So the figure I'm telling you is just the people who came to us. What I'd also like to appreciate today is that the families are getting organized.
The families of the disappeared in Borno are forming an association of like minds with the hope that they will one day reunite with their missing family members.
Muna sake jajanta muku amma kuma kamar yadda na faɗa a ci gaba da addu'a din insha Allah za su fito domin kullun a kullu yaumin ana samun mutane suna fitowa.
The families of the disappeared stress the importance of establishing effective tracing mechanisms and providing financial aid to help them cope with the dual pressures of economic hardship and emotional trauma. In Maiduguri for News Central, Umaru Kirawa.
Coming up, Gabon junta leader marks first anniversary of coup. We have details shortly. Join us again. Thank you for staying with us. The news continues in West Africa, where Gabon's transitional president, Brice Nguema, delivered a televised national address to mark the first anniversary of the military takeover that ended 55 years of Bongo family rule. Oligui assumed power in Gabon on August 30th, 2023, after ousting the then newly elected president, Ali Bongo. Upon being sworn in as interim leader, he pledged to hold elections in 2025.
La libération, nous avons consulté les forces vives de la nation. De cet échange est née l'idée d'un dialogue national inclusif. Je me réjouis de la réussite de ces assises, dont les propositions seront soumises au référendum, qui aura lieu dans les prochaines semaines, conformément au chronogramme de la transition. En temps privé d'une compagnie aérienne nationale, nous avons décidé de la création de Fly Gabon, dont j'ai eu l'honneur de lancer officiellement les activités. Celle-ci obéit à notre volonté de maîtriser le secteur du transport aérien national. Cette compagnie nous permettra de retrouver la grandeur de notre pays sur la scène internationale. Gabonaises, Gabonais, un an après le coup de la libération, notre État est en train de se reconstruire autour des valeurs et des grands principes républicains. La Constitution de notre pays obéit à ces principes. Elle garantit au peuple gabonais le respect des libertés fondamentales.
The German army on Friday vacated an airbase in junta-run Niger Republic, completing the pullout of Bundeswehr troops from the troubled Sahel nation. In late May, Germany and Niger reached an interim agreement allowing German forces to continue operating their airbase in the capital Niamey until the end of August. However, negotiations to extend this agreement collapsed, largely because base personnel would no longer have immunity from prosecution. Senior German and Nigerian military officials separately read out a joint statement announcing the completion of the pullout. They said 60 German troops and 146 tons of equipment had been repatriated on 5 cargo planes. At least 14 people were killed and 29 injured in a collision between a bus and a truck in Mali on Thursday, the Transport Ministry has confirmed. Now, the accident occurred around 6 a.m. on a major road near the town of Fana, east of the capital, Bamako. According to the ministry, the bus was traveling from Fana to Bamako, while the truck was headed in the opposite direction. No further details were provided. Road accidents are frequent in Mali, often attributed to poor road conditions, faulty vehicles, and human error. In July, a similar incident claimed 16 lives where 2 buses collided in central Mali. Libya's central bank governor, and that's Sadiq Al-Kebir, has fled the country following threats from armed groups amid escalating tensions between rival administrations over the bank's management. Al-Kebir, who oversees billions of dollars on oil revenue, said he and the other senior bank officials were compelled to leave Libya to safeguard their lives from potential attacks by armed militias. The situation has deteriorated since early August when an armed group besieged the bank, demanding Kebir's removal. On August 18, the bank announced it was suspending all operations following the abduction of its chief information technology officer, who was later released. Still ahead, German authorities deport Afghan criminals. We have details in a moment. Stay with us. German Interior Minister Nancy Faeser announced on Friday that Berlin has deported Afghan criminals to Afghanistan for the first time since the Taliban seized power in 2021. The The decision comes amid mounting pressure on the government to address migration concerns. FERSA said the law has been upheld and deportations will continue when there is a legal obligation to leave the country. This development comes just a week after a deadly knife attack in Suligan claimed by the Islamic State group.
Dass wir das Recht durchgesetzt haben und Straftäter aus Afghanistan zurückgeschoben haben. Aus meiner Sicht ist das notwendig, damit das Vertrauen weiter existiert in den Rechtsstaat. Und ich bin froh, dass wir das mit Partnern vollziehen konnten. Es gab keine direkten Kontakte Deutschlands mit Afghanistan oder Taliban. Also wir machen solche Abschiebungen immer nur rechtssicher. Das ist nach § 58 Aufenthaltsgesetz. Wenn vollziehbare Ausreisepflicht existiert, stellen wir sicher, dass wir das können. Es gibt keinen Abschiebestopp in Afghanistan, der das verhindert hätte. Insofern gehe ich auch davon aus, dass sie dort sicher sind. Wir wollen uns durch Terroristen nicht zurückdrängen lassen, unsere Art zu feiern hier in Deutschland mit aller Vielfalt, die unsere Gesellschaft bietet. Wir wollen das aufrechterhalten. Wir wollen dort nicht zurückweichen. Deswegen ist es aber wichtig, Waffenverbotszonen auch zu erweitern, gerade dort, wo Feste stattfinden.
In business, a total of 11 companies have recently been identified for potential delisting by the Nigerian Exchange Group. Notably, nearly half of these companies belong to the financial sector and insurance industry, indicating a significant impact on these vital areas of the economy. Additionally, there is a considerable representation from the manufacturing sector among those earmarked for delisting. On Market Pulse today, Samuel Oyekomi, a research and insight associate at Norenberger, provided insight and analysis regarding these developments.
Across industries or sectors, I don't think those are there's anything peculiar around it. It speaks specifically to the fact that a number of these firms are not able to meet up with the minimum regulatory threshold that companies who are listed in the equities market are supposed to be able to maintain, and that's why we see some of them involuntarily being forced to delist from the market, while a number of them also are trying to delist on their own, and it also underscores the level of hardship even in the economy, because businesses are not doing quite well for many of the businesses. Not financial sector, the likes of manufacturing and some other industries.
Africa's undisputed #1 badminton player, Anu Okpayori, is out of podium reckoning as the Lagos International Badminton Classics approaches its closing stage. The Nigerian star player, ranked 103, lost to India's Samavir, ranked 362 in 2 straight games played on court 1 that ended 2-0, subjecting Africa's #1 to a back-to-back exit at the quarterfinals in the men's singles of the championship after doing so in 2023. Okpayori, who captained Team Nigeria at Paris 2024, attributed his exit to fatigue. Egyptian official Amin Mohamed Omar, who has been a FIFA referee since 2017, has been selected by the Confederation of African Football as referee for next week's 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifying match between Nigeria's Super Eagles and the Cheetahs of Benin Republic. The match day 1 encounter, scheduled for the Godswill Akpabio Stadium in Uyo, will kick off at 5 p.m. Nigerian time. Omar will be in company with compatriots Mohamed Abdulregal, Hamad Hossein Taha, and Hamad El Gandon as the 3-time African champions confront a team coached by former Nigeria manager Gernot Rohr. The match will be the baptism for new Nigeria manager Bruno Labbadia. And that's all on the news. Let's take a look again at some of the major stories. Gunmen attack on Islamic boarding school in Yobe State has left 3 dead and 1 injured. Gabon junta leader Nguema has marked first anniversary of coup. We also told you that Central Bank Governor has fled Libya amid threats from armed groups. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen and follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch us live on DSTV, channel 422, Star Times, channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Adebola Adedugba.